Hello everyone. Welcome you all to EPG Pathshala. Me, Dr. Saurabh Madhurde, Assistant Professor in Sociology, the University of Burdwan. The paper which I will be discussing today is on social movement, and the module is the new religious movement, which is one part of the social movement. The module is SM12. Now, starting with social movement, I would like to introduce you all to the concept of the new religious movement. New religious movement is often abbreviated as NRM, or New Religious Movement. NRM refers to a bewildering variety of spiritual enthusiasms that had emerged in the West after 1960s and was later used chronologically to refer to all religions that had established themselves in Western Europe, North America, India, and Japan since 1945, and in Africa since 1890s. Now, one may ask, what is the need for the new term, new religious movement? What's so special and unique about this? So the need can be encapsulated into two main points. First, the lack of consensus amongst sociologists about other terms like sects and cults, traditionally applied by academicians to such small-scale religious movements. And secondly, counter-cult movement of 1970s, the term cult acquired a derogatory meaning because the term cult was not seen in a very good light. So the apprehension of the anti-cultist regarding the term cult were legitimated and reformed by the tragic events related to the members of the Solar Temple and Heaven's Gate in North America and Europe and Om Shinrikyo in Japan. Though there is hardly any consensus among sociologists regarding the frame of emergence of the new religious movement. That means they were not sure about when and where and at what period of time the new religious movement emerged. But certainly there is a consensus on the fact that the new religious movement is apparently neutral in comparison to other traditional terms like cult and sect, which are used for other religious movements. Now, talking about the new religious movement and new elements of NRMs, what are the new elements? Because when we are talking about NRMs, there are certain new elements that has to be incorporated in order to give the new term a new meaning. So what are the new elements of the NRMs? Firstly, NRMs are said to be more specialized or esoteric than those longer established religious groups. The second point is that the tendency of the new religious movements to allow lay people to participate more fully in their activities than is common in many older religious organizations, because in older religious organizations, commoners are usually barred from entering into the religious arena. So in the new religious movement, they have their entry into these new religious discourses. Thirdly, the emphasis of NRMs to encourage the followers to translate their spirituality into practical everyday action. That means spirituality is not something which is theoretical, which has to be only discussed in the theoretical plane. It has to be practiced in a very day-to-day activities. So it has to be translated into a day-to-day activities. So it is one of the major important emphasis of new religious movements. And fourthly, the new religious movements often promise men more rapid spiritual mobility. Fifth, the aspect of contemporary religious leaders in all ventures of exercise. That is, religious leaders are today more visible as the promoters of modern medical, technical, other educational, and providers of integrated modern healthcare then as holy preceptors and as religious leaders, as you can get examples of Baba Ramdev, because he is not only a preacher of particular religious sect or particular religious ideology. He is a sort of healthcare provider in his own unique religious ways, through yoga, through pranayama and other things. So they are providers of integrated modern healthcare. Then as holy preceptors and as religious leaders, they command larger following as instructors of practical yoga or the art of healing, as you have seen in media and in any other channel. Sri Ravi Shankar, his art of living is a very popular topic nowadays. And the esoteric doctrines and the arcane rituals. And sixth, new religious movements are compatible with rationality and scientificity, because the new religious movement has understood that in order to survive in this modern rationalized world, it has to have a marriage with science. Other than that, new religious movement cannot just survive. Seventh, the new religious movement is a matter of choice or preference of the individual or group, whereas one is born in the organized religion and conversion is still not widely a prevalent phenomena, because new religious movement talks about choice or preference. In our postmodern era, where there is multiplicity of options, then the new religious movements always endorses the feeling, always endorses the idea that the followers will have to choose between options in order for the new religious movement to sustain itself. And eighth is that the emergence of new religious movement has also led to the commercialization of religion and spirituality, which you can see in every day-to-day print and non-print media, because now religion has become not only a secluded individual phenomena, but it has become a public commercialized vehicle for transmission of ideas, transmission of different religious and spiritual products, and so on and so forth. Let me now talk about the sources of the new religious movements, or NRMs. What are the different sources which led to the emergence of the new religious movements? The first is moral ambiguity and value confusion. Moral ambiguity means there is a confusion regarding the moral standard of the people. Because in today's chaotic world, where morality, ethics are very much subjective and so very much individualistic, so there tends to be, or there is bound to be, a value confusion and moral ambiguities. So people do resort to traditional gurus or religious healers, healers not only in terms of physical health, but also in terms of psychological health. What should be their way out into certain puzzle situations, into certain situations which demand a clear-cut alternatives. So moral ambiguity and value confusion is one of the important marker of the source of new religious movement. Second is the dislocations in communal patterns. As we have seen that in the modern industrialized society, where joint families are gradually disintegrating and breaking down, and where neighbors are becoming anonymous to each other, there is bound to be a dislocation in communal patterns, communal sentiments, communal bonds. So that is gradually giving way to a dislocation in communal pattern or communal structure of the society, which is also another factor for the emergence of the new religious movements. I will discuss these points in details, but for the time being, I am just giving a brief anecdote about all these things. The third is the state of deprivation. Now, deprivation is a highly subjective term. That is why there is a term or a connotation called relative deprivation. That means I am feeling that I am deprived than the other, because I am feeling that I am being deprived of certain resources which the other people are getting. So this feeling of deprivation is a subjective phenomena, and that is why in today's discourse on poverty, poverty is also called a very relative concept. It is not a total economic concept because it is based on the ethos of relative deprivation. So state of deprivation is another important factor for the source of new religious movement. And lastly, the last precipitating factor which leads to the emergence of new religious movement is health and spirituality. Health, not only physical health, which I have discussed right now, there is also psychological and mental health. How people can cope up with the increasing stress, demands of the society, which has a detrimental effect on their physical health, on the psychological health, on their social health as well. Because according to the definition of World Health Organization, health is something which is not only physical, but also mental as well as social. That means healthy mind and a healthy body within a healthy community. So in order to get a holistic picture of health and also to get a spiritual dimension attached to that health dimension, so health and spirituality becomes another important precipitating factor for the emergence of the new religious movements. Now coming to the first topic, the moral ambiguity and value confusion. Max Weber was probably the first to hint towards the meaninglessness of this modern world because of the increasing rationalization, because we are becoming more and more rationalized. We are becoming more and more cause and effect driven people. Extending the idea implicit in Weber's proposition, some sociologists have pinpointed the climate of normative breakdown, that means the normative jeopardization, or the moral ambiguity or moral confusion, and value confusion as the context of spiritual ferment. The upsurge of new religious movement, or NRMS, is primarily due to the crisis in these values and normativities, or in other words, it can be said that these are called moral and normative ambiguities because of decaying cultural traditions, of absolute moral standards in a highly differentiated and pluralistic society. That means when the society is becoming more and more pluralistic and differentiated and postmodern, there cannot be any monolithic or there cannot be any immutable standard of ethics and morality. That means morality itself is fragmented. So when morality itself is fragmented and when the morality itself is not monolithic or immutable, it tends to give way to value confusion and moral ambiguities. So based on this factor, the new religious movements or NRMS has emerged. The second precipitating factor is the dislocations in communal patterns. In a rapidly modernizing, urbanized mass society dominated by impersonal, bureaucratic megastructures, new religious movements emerge as a solace and provide the comfort of a surrogate family. In comparison to traditional institutionalized religions, new religious movements employ a language of kinship like brothers and sisters, father and mother in a more expressive way. Now these kinship, when I'm talking about these kinship terms like brothers and sisters, one can easily remember what Swami Vivekananda has once said in 1893 on 11th September 1893, my dear sisters and brothers of America, when he proclaimed the sisterhood and the brotherhood. So that is a universal kinship terminology which are used by people in religion to make other people feel that they are at home or they are in a bond of kinship with each other. So NRMs employ the language of kinship like brothers and sisters, fathers and mothers in a more expressive way. From my personal experience, I can tell I have been associated with International Society for Krishna Consciousness. I have been a life member there for long. There, each and every person who are attached to ISKCON do call woman as ma or mother. So it's a universal terminology for all women across age, across caste, across other socio-cultural background. So NRMS employ these language of kinship, that means brothers and sisters, fathers and mothers, in a more expressive way, not only in a more expressive way, but also in a more inclusive way. Devotees of new religious movements have a feeling of a large extended family with fellow devotees as spiritual sisters and brothers, with charismatic spiritual guru of the movement as the guardian or the universal father or universal mother, according to the sex of, or the biological sex of the spiritual guru. This theory provides an explanation of how dislocation in communal patterns creates a fertile ground for the upsurge of the new religious movements. Next, the source of new religious movement is the state of deprivation. As I have already said, I will just elaborate on this particular topic. Deprivation theory maintains that religious commitment is the result of the compensation that religion provides in situations where individuals meet obstacles in life and search for alternative goals. That means they are obstructed in certain part of their life in doing certain things, and they are wanting a way out. They're wanting a way out in their family problems. They're wanting a way out in their professional lives. So this is also another precipitating factor for the emergence of new religious movement. Here I will call upon the idea of Karl Marx, who claimed that religion serves as a sort of comfort, and it takes the form of protest and reaction against injustice and misery. In this particular context, I will say that Marx had said that religion is the opium of the masses. Why he has said this particular thing is that opium gives a sort of comfort to the wounded soul, where a person gets an escape route from the reality. And religion provides justification for those miseries. Although Marx has explained religion in certain derogatory ways because of his own thinking or own unique way of understanding life, but still Glock and Stark were very much inspired from Marx and expanded the idea of Marx and regarded deprivation as a necessary condition for the rise of new religious movements, or NRMS. Now, there are 5 kinds of deprivation to which individuals or groups may be subject to and relate to others in the society, like economic, number 2, social, number 3, organismic, number 4, ethical, and number 5, psychic. Now, the point of contention here is that these 5 areas are not mutually exclusive, but they are interconnected and are interpenetrating in their own unique ways. So these economic, social, organismic, ethical and psychic dimensions are not mutually exclusive. They are interpenetrating and interdependent, and holistically they lead to a state of wholesome state of deprivation, which is another source of new religious movement. Now, coming on to health and spirituality as another precipitating factor for the source of new religious movement, it is believed that spiritual and religious attention to health is holistic in the belief that spiritual, emotional, and physical aspects of well-being are fundamentally interconnected. They are not mutually exclusive. That means when we are looking at a person, we have to look at him from these different perspectives, not from only physical or mental perspectives, because these are very much interconnected or glued with each other. Today's spiritual healing movements are one expression of the dissatisfaction with the limitation of the so-called compartmentalized, rationalized medicine. Because compartmentalized, rationalized medicine always tend to be very part-specific. It always tend to be very specific to a particular body which is ailing. And that is why it is failing nowadays. For a holistic understanding of health, we should not only understand the physicality of a person, but also the psychology, the sociology of that person. So the new religious movement always encourages a holistic approach of understanding health. Holiness, physical and emotional health, spiritual growth, salvation, and sense of well-being, as I have already said, are intertwined in a holistic linkage of mind, body, spirit. While locating the cause of illness, the new religious and spiritual healing movements do not reject these medical explanations, because they say that these medical explanations are necessary, but they add on over the basic foundation of these medical explanations of disease causation. But they strongly consider that medical causes are itself and singularly inadequate explanations for illness. For understanding illness in a holistic way, other dimensions have to be incorporated. Now, speaking about the types of new religious movement. The study of new religious movement has been replete with various typologies of these new religious movements. Frederick Bird distinguishes between the various new religious movements in terms of relationships of the followers to masters, or the relationship of the religious seekers to the sacred power that they revere. Wallace's conceptual space is formed by the components of a logical trichotomy. First is the world-rejecting groups. The second is the world-affirming groups. And the third is the world-accommodating groups. Now, I am coming to each of these individually. Now, talking about the world-rejecting groups. World-rejecting groups are like a closed group of followers who believe that the outside world is impure. Therefore, minimum contact needs to be maintained with the outside world. They only dwell with the inner world of psychic consciousness. They totally disagree any contact with the outside world. The second one is the world affirming groups. They are just the opposite of the world rejecting groups. They say they don't treat that world as impure. Rather, they seek to attain human potential through the release of divinity or creativity inherent in the person. Here I can give example of Swami Vivekananda when one said that what is better to understand the inner meaning of Gita. He said, in order to understand the better meaning of Gita, one should play football. Because if you play football, both your body and mind will be fit, so that you can understand the inner dynamics of such a huge religious script. The third is the world accommodating group, which offers experimental techniques that can be utilized by people in order to revitalize their spirituality more generally. Beside Wallace's typology of NRMS, or New Religious Movement, on the basis of orientations of the new religions to the world, there has been an attempt by scholars like Ambrose and Arvind Sharma to provide a typological framework to understand the new Hindu religious movement on the basis of their response to social change and orientations of the West. In contemporary India, the third orientation is rooted in Ramakrishna Mission's philosophy led to great influx of religious gurus and ideas to the West during the 1960s and 70s, and thereby they contributed to the quote-unquote global Hinduism. Now coming on to the significance of the new religious movements. Why the study of new religious movement is so important? It is important for two basic reasons. The importance of the study of new religious movement has been established on these two basic premises. First, it indicates the extent to which established organizations are challenged for the allegiance of their members and because of the influence that they yield on those members. And secondly, the conditions in which people are prepared to participate in these new religious movements are revealing in that they display the shifting lines of tension or fracture in social and cultural structures. So new needs in the new world are creating more and more tension for people to go in for these new religious movements. This is the second point. Now, just going through the entire topic in a summarized version, we can say that the old vocabulary of sect and cult resonating with the defiant orthodoxy and judgmentalism are unable to explain these new forms of religious expressions or religious manifestations. Moreover, in the wake of counter-cult movement of 1970s, the term cult acquired a derogatory meaning. Therefore, there is a need for a new term, quote-unquote, new religious movement, which is apparently neutral in comparison to other traditional terms like cult and sect. Thank you so much for your patient hearing. Thank you.